I am so excited about the conversation that we're about to have. I'm here with a good friend, Toby Walters. Hello, sir.
Hello. I need you to lower your expectations to get started.
This is the best part about having you, is that I feel like we've had so many sidebar combos, and I've gotten to hear you and your podcast, and you've been to SALT. So I love that you're just like, let's lower that expectation so that we can maybe raise it. But I said before we started recording, part of what sparked all this, Toby, was you wrote a book, which, by the way, is not a small feat.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, we could probably spend a couple of minutes here just talking about the process of that. But how many years or months did you actually spend on the content side? Obviously, you've been probably percolating and thinking about an outline and stuff like that. But like in the
I mean, if you think content, I spent years on the content because I took the content from my years of experience of talking to production leaders at churches all over America, gathering stories on our podcast, trying to just like itemize and systematize all the content we have, but the actual sitting down and writing was about 4 months of work.
And if it was anything like any process I've gone through, you wrote it and someone said, you got to rewrite a whole lot of it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I had
what?
I had a writing coach behind me, so he would remove like 90% of my jokes, be like, you can't say that, dude.
Yeah. Toby wrote the book, Sacred Spaces, Modern Production, and I was telling him right before we started, and I just want to kind of give this shout out as we start. It is a phenomenal book. Because of the fact that not only is it great theory, it's great context, it's great overview as you're maybe in a smaller mid-sized church trying to yearn for what some of these larger churches, that you have got so many practical stories of the North Point guys, the Elevation, Saddleback, Prestonwood, Church of the Highlands. I mean, all these guys, you've referenced actual people and stories and conversations with them, which is so powerful. It not only has some of the theory of how do you get to kind of the next level and the realities of the costs of production, but you've also got shortcuts. You've got real stories of people who have done things that, of the guy who needed a PA or the Village Chapel guy that is like, okay, I'm going to do this a whole lot less because I can't wait for the building rebuild or remodel to actually do the PA. So there's so many practical things. I think you'll find yourself in the story. I think you'll also be encouraged by the opportunity that we have as production folks to no longer be isolated. I think that was what I took away from this mostly. But let's back up. Why don't you just give a quick synopsis? You talk about this in kind of the first chapter, but how did you get into church production? How did you get into this world?
Yeah, when I was a kid growing up in a small Baptist church, my dad was a music director, so I was kind of a PK by proxy. And as I got towards my teenage years, I was always at the church, so natural, just like precocious, get into everything. And I just started breaking stuff left and right. And so I think
limited to stained glass windows potentially.
I started eyeing those stained glass windows, thinking, those look fun. So eventually my dad said, you know what, we need somebody to run the soundboard and we need to keep you out of trouble. Do you want to sit back there and see what happens? And I just fell in love at age 13, and it was gear and production. And then eventually I started leading worship. And so, I mean, pretty much from day one, it felt like I was designed to be in the church disrupting things with production and worship.
Which is such a great thing, because there is an opportunity for production ministry specifically, creative ministry, production, technical ministry in the church, where we can shape up the next generation.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of risk and fear of, okay, do I really want to give the ADHD distracted middle school, high schooler an opportunity? But I'm that same story.
Yeah.
You're that story.
Yeah.
And if someone outside of our parents didn't say, I believe in a gift, and I think in some ways that affects the calling on our lives, I would say it was the same thing.
Yeah.
What do you say to tech directors who are like, no, I can't have youth?
Sure. I mean, I think we opened a recording studio in our church basement when I was a teenager, and that was unheard of. And then when some of my friends that heard that we had a recording studio, they begged to come over and just play with the gear, because there was nowhere they could play with the gear. If you fast forward today and a church like Willow Creek or Elevation said, hey, during the week, you can come in and you can play with our SD10, R338, whatever it is. We have virtual soundtrack. We have tracks. You can just learn how to mix. We got one of our guys and we'll talk you through it. And then you just keep drinks out of the booth and all you do is press recall. Like, that's insane that all the digital gear, like, they can mess around with, they can play with, they can learn with. Where else can a teenager learn on a $100,000 audio console? Yeah. And then they go on to these careers with, you guys in live production, and they're touring with these major artists. They're all coming out of churches.
Yeah.
So it's such an amazing opportunity to raise up the next generation.
Yeah, you talk about Alec Takahashi in the book. Tell his story just a little bit, because that connects to that.
So he didn't grow up in church, but he went to an Easter service at Bayside Church in California when he was 13 years old, and he said it was like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and it blew his mind. And so he begged his parents, can I go? They're doing like a church production seminar thing. And he went to the lighting class, and he just asked question after question after question. He was 13 years old, just sitting in that class. And then he went up and begged, how do I serve at the church? And so he shows up week 1. He had read through the entire manual for their like ETC lighting console. He's 13 years old. By age 16, he's working part-time on paper, but like 40 hours a week. And then eventually they hire him full-time at age 18. He doesn't go to college. He becomes their full-time lighting director, but they don't invest in him as a person. They don't pour into him. They don't disciple him. They don't lead him. He doesn't have a relationship or trust with the pastoral staff. And eventually he says, you know what? I'm going to take my skills on the road. And a few years ago, he was the youngest ever to be nominated and then win what's called a Parnelli Award, which is like the Grammys for production.
Yeah.
And he won for the creative director for Thomas Rhett. So he was recognized as the greatest lighting director on the planet at age 27, having at age 13 gone to church for the first time.
It's crazy. And so how do we help encourage and equip leadership teams to say, wow, there's a discipleship pathway in tech ministries, in production realm?
I think, first off, I'm frustrated that there are very few production pastors in the church space. They're tech directors, they're LDs, they're whatever you want to call them. And then it's kind of seen like, your job is to stand here, press the buttons, make sure Sunday goes off without any distractions, and then that's it. But if you approach your pastor and say, I want to start discipling and leading young people, what now? Your pastor's ears are going to perk up, and he's going to give you every resource you could want to then start to do that. If you say, I need to not be present at the women's Bible study on Wednesday morning so that I can prepare an hour lesson for the teenagers. And then you partner with the youth pastor and say, I want to give opportunities to young, teenage boys and girls to come in, learn these things, learn these skills, and then start to, because that was me at age 13. I didn't love going to church. I found it really boring. But as soon as I got behind the soundboard, I was all in. And so getting those different people together to see that vision and then get a plan forward, like you'll get all the space you need to make that happen.
Yeah, you tell the story of North Point Community Church's tech director going to Andy Stanley and essentially referencing his own book or series, Choosing to Cheat, which I think is now like Balancing Work and Life. I think he stopped the Choosing to Cheat. But it was a book that profoundly changed me. And talk a little bit about that story, because I think there's something interesting about language I think we can dive into.
Yeah, so Luke Ropeman, he came aboard at North Point, and every year they do an annual review, as a lot of churches do. And he just mentioned in his annual review, a lot of, I love working here, I don't want to stop working here. But when we do set changes, which a lot of our listeners do set changes to their church, it's an 80 to 90 hour work week.
Yeah.
And they were doing them every 6 weeks. And so he didn't realize all those reviews get read by Pastor Andy. And so 2 weeks later, he gets called into Andy's office, the big dog. And Andy says, I want you to explain to me, talk me through why it's 80 to 90 hours when you do these set changes. And so Luke just talked him through it. And Andy said, I had no idea it took that. Let's work together as a team, see if we can redesign how we're doing this, because I had no context. And he had even written a book or a series on balancing work and life. And so, Andy was basically calling himself out to saying, okay, let's fix this.
I think what's so powerful is I know Andy had told a lot of stuff. I grew up in the Alpharetta area, so the North Point Community Church staff is people I know really well. And I know that culture, and I've heard Andy talk a lot about this. But I think because he had said, North Point's only going to be as successful as I can give 45 hours a week, was like his cap when they started.
Yeah.
Now you get Luke, who's saying on an annual review, I'm working 80, 90 hours.
Yeah.
That's double what you said we were going to grow at. And you're using, and for Andy, that was a very intentional thing. That I think the 80, 90 hours was a red flag, because Andy had taught over and over and over in Choosing Cheat, we're going to only be as successful as 45 hours a week allows.
Yeah.
I think there's something powerful about tech directors, production directors, even production pastors, if that person exists,
Mm-hmm.
to using the specific language of the vision of the pastor, right? You talked about if
Yeah.
you go to your pastor and say, I want to disciple, 10 middle school, high school students and use them as cam ops or audio engineers or lighting directors, they would love it because you use the word discipleship.
Yes.
How do you see language when you are, because you get a chance to interact with the tech director, but you're also working with the executive pastor, as you guys are collecting gear or selling gear, you've had to understand, okay, there's a language with tech production, but there's also a language of leadership.
Yeah. I like to encourage the production leaders to humbly approach their pastor and ask about things they care about. So if you're saying, I want to be a better leader, I want to learn how to disciple my team better, oh, that's going to melt his heart. But also come to him and just impress him with some language sometimes of saying, hey, just so you know, when you wear this tie pattern, I don't know how many pastors wear ties anymore. I think a lot still do. But the refresh rate on the LED wall does this weird thing. And then the live stream, I just want to encourage you, if you wear a black tie, I can, and so you're saying things that the pastor's like, I don't know what you're saying. You're saying make me look better? Yeah. Okay. So just kind of approaching it in both those ways, but you have to approach your pastor.
Yeah.
You have to treat him like a friend. Ask him or her, like, hey, what's going on? What's important to you? How can I help you better present your message and what you're trying to accomplish here? It's a conversation.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have amazing guests just like Toby on our podcast all the time. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more conversations.
You actually talk early in the book about Jericho and how an instrument is what brought the walls down. You talk about Jesus using the boat when he's trying to preach, and you really reference it. And I love the analogy, Toby. You talked about like this is early technology in its makings, right? I mean, it wasn't tech that was powered with a electrical current, but it was leveraging natural spaces and natural instrumentation to amplify the voice. Talk about, you tied that actually into, does everybody understand the why behind what they're doing?
Sure.
Why is that so important?
Yeah, I think just because the word production doesn't exist in the Bible, we think it's a new discipline.
Yeah.
But the Bible is inundated with stories of production. We just have to learn how to see them and pull the theology out. Because otherwise, why are we doing it today?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what the next generation is asking. Why are we doing all these production elements? So understanding from the beginning, you can make a joke about God said, let there be light. And so hit the lighting cue. But then elements of the walls of Jericho, they march around and God gives them specific instructions for the audio production. And it's an audio cue that brings the walls down.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the story of Gideon's army, and with 300 men, they smashed torches on the ground, and that lighting cue is what disrupted the enemy and scared them off. And Jesus using natural acoustic elements to speak to hundreds or thousands of people. And you can even watch these YouTube videos today of these things being recreated in real time. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that it's so easy for us in production to kind of get caught up in the gear and the sort of like beauty of the brand or the sort of comparison game of keeping up with the Joneses or the church down the road or the church on Instagram that we see. But I think it's so important to also see that these are tools that the Lord can use and the Holy Spirit can use to help break down walls in someone's life.
Yeah.
And can help ignite something for them. And I don't think it's manipulation. It's an amplification of what the Lord's doing in the space already.
Yeah.
Huge believer of that. There's so much I feel like we could talk about. One of the things that was fascinating to me was in chapter 4, you actually really break down what I called the like order of prioritization of production. You didn't call it that. I just kind of gave you that title. But do you want to walk through a little bit of that? Of like, I think there's so many people out here that they go to Instagram, and I'm bad at this. You see something from an Elevation Church, and you're like, oh, I want that, and they're pointing to the LED wall or the cinematic cameras, and you help really black and white kind of go, yeah, that's like number 6.
Yeah.
Can we go back to like number 1, which isn't even audio?
Yeah.
Number 1 is what?
The source in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The acoustics, right? What's coming from stage, how it's bouncing around, regardless of amplification. Why is that so important?
Everything translates through that. So if you start with the room, and you could even say like start with a tuned drum, that's the source on the stage. But if you're talking about the room, if the acoustics in the room, you are now fighting against physics for every other element, and every other element of lighting and video. Nobody cares how it looks or how it, like the lighting element, how it looks when it comes across the screen, if it doesn't sound good. Our ears tell us the first information. And it's really hard to get a good mix online if you don't have a good mix in the room, and it's almost impossible to get a good mix in the room if you have a bad room. So just starting with that, and what's insane is that's usually the first thing to get cut in the budget.
Yeah. Either acoustical treatment or, especially, I mean, you just tipped into like, I think that sixth priority of once you get into video, now you got to go back to audio and go, how are we doing that well?
Yeah.
Because it's so true. There's a difference between the live reverberation of a room from an acoustic standpoint. When you're in the room, you're not going to notice that. But when you're online, you're like, this feels like an echo chamber, right? I think about this a lot. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I don't think it's happening as much. But if you've ever watched like the Grammys or the Oscars or even like the ACM Awards or the CMAs, there's times you're like, that sounds awful. And or there's like an echo, or there's a weird pattern that's developing. And a lot of that is really because broadcast is not able to isolate, right? It's not like we're in a studio like this where there is no other noise and we have full, you know. So I think that's so true to help encourage churches on that. You talk in chapter 7, and I think this is where I'd love to unpack a little bit about isolation. Yeah. And you talk about, you encourage churches to essentially do two things. What was that?
Reach out to other churches and build your network and connect with them.
Yeah. And then go to events or conferences or gatherings or meetups.
So Justin Firesheets, he learned broadcasting. He went to school for it. And then his dream was to work for the major leagues and wanted to be a sports commentator, broadcaster. But then he started going to Church of the Highlands just on the weekends, started volunteering. And then they asked him, you want to be our tech director? And he's thinking, I have no interest in working for a church. But as often happens, God has other plans. And so he comes aboard as their production director. He had never worked in a church before. And then he's sitting in a staff meeting, and their lead pastor, Chris Hodges, says, I want every one of you to know 5 other people at other churches that do your same job better than you, because I don't want you to assume that you know how to do it best. And so he's sitting there
so much spiritually in that.
Yes.
Encouragement too.
Yeah. He's about to wet himself because he's like, I couldn't even name 5 other churches at that point. So the very first thing that happened is he found out there was a church production conference at like the next month. And he said, can I get approval to go to that? And they said, absolutely. And so he went to every breakout he could, and he met every teacher leader of the breakout, introduced himself, asked questions, and then just asked, hey, could I email you sometime? And every single one of them saying, heck yeah, dude, I love that. And so he started to do that more and more and just build up his network that way. He started, he looked at the Outreach 100, the 100 biggest churches, and he said, I'm going to make a goal for myself. I'm going to get a contact from somebody at every one of the Outreach 100. And then he said, well, now that I know all these people, I think it's my job to start gathering the community. So he started hosting roundtables at his church, at different churches. And then he suddenly became, and this was over years of building this, but then he became the person that people were calling and saying, hey, do you know a person at this church? We need to hire somebody. Do you know anybody? Can you help us, put together this event? Yeah.
And he invited me several times into the roundtable that he would do online. Because he was like, it's just an open Zoom. There's no expectations. There's no agenda. We're just going to unpack this stuff.
Yeah.
So, so vital. Like if you're hearing this and you needed one more person to push you over the edge, Toby hopefully is that guy. Go reach out to the person down the road.
Yeah.
You and I don't want to say the name for the sake. I don't want to like throw anybody on the bus, but you and I both went to a church that it has a church like that almost shares a parking lot. Like it's kind of, and I remember the day that I understood or recognized that both tech directors of both churches, whom I knew separately, had never met the other. And I'm like, how do you not know each other?
That's
like,
insane.
I'm just going to send you each other's text or cell phone numbers and let you go from there.
Yeah.
Everybody hates ads, don't we? Don't worry. This isn't an ad. It's an invitation. You need to go to saltcommunity.com, sign up for the free account, and you will get tons of incredible resources, and you will start your way in engaging with this amazing community all year round. Then you can upgrade and get, meetups and all the extra content that we have, the online learning platform, and year-round ability to train and equip your team so that you can be better at reaching your community. Again, not an ad, it's an invitation. So go now, take hold of that, saltcommunity.com. And it's just crazy how we hide behind busyness. We hide behind the tasks that have to get done to get Sunday. But it goes back to your why. It goes back to the discipleship idea. It's like, can you see yourself as a ministry of this church, not just a service provider to the church?
Yeah.
Any other fun transformation stories besides the fire sheets of...
I mean, I just think of so many elements, like when we were, when I was planting a church, I was the worship leader in the early 2000s, and we were all in our 20s. We had zero resources, zero budget, zero everything. And so just building a network of saying, hey, we're doing this thing. Can we come see what you're doing? And so I remember specifically, like, they were talking about their ceiling, and they said, we didn't paint our ceiling black. We painted it very, very dark brown because black gave a bluish haze to the room based on the lighting. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then just asking for resources of, hey, do you guys have any extra gear you don't need? And we need some subs. And one church saying, oh, yeah, we got a pair of subs just sitting in the closet. You want them?
Yeah.
Just all those resources and learning. And I've heard so many stories of churches saying, our audio contractor is not available this Sunday. Do
how
you
you
have
share
a
these
replacement?
resources?
And
Yeah. So cool. All right, I want to dive into an area of the book that was a little bit interesting. You talked a little bit about, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to actually open this part up. It was in chapter 3, and you started talking about one of the things as you guys, as Church Gear started growing, you had a great opportunity to sort of, with the podcast and just with all the connections and relationships you had, you started getting a chance to know, like, you kind of fire sheets, right? Like, you got to know all these church tech directors. You became friends with them all. And you said in the book, and I loved this, that you would ask them, who are you watching?
Yeah.
What churches are you looking for inspiration? The answer we often surprised us, though, none of them. I don't watch other churches for inspiration. One production director told us that one of the largest churches in America, churches aren't innovating anymore. Instead, I watch other live events, major pop tours on Netflix or Netflix specials. And you basically said, like, innovation's happening all around us. It may not be in the church. Will you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, and I may get myself into hot water. I'm comfortable with it. It's fine. But, if you... I start with my kids who are 14 and 16, and when they say to me, why does church music all sound the same? And then I have to realize, because it's all written by 4 churches.
Yeah, or 4 people, yeah.
Yeah, and...
It's probably less than 4 churches if we really think about it, but yeah.
It's crazy, but that's true.
Yeah.
Like, 90% of the songs we're singing in our churches are written by 4 churches or 4 people, a very limited scope. And so if you want to innovate something new in Christian music, how can you do that if you are being influenced by the same 4 entities over and over and over? And I think that's also true of production. Like, how many of us are looking at Elevation and Transformation, and while they're doing amazing things, they're not doing what, we watch shows like Adolescence. Did you see that on Netflix?
Mm-mm.
Like, just the entire series was one shot. And so just like
reminds me of that Adele Grammy performance where it's like the same RoboCam the whole time.
Yeah. And so is a church doing something like that? And I know there are some churches out there that are extremely creative and extremely cutting edge, but for the most part, it's a lot of copy and paste because somebody's watching Elevation and then they're copying that. And then somebody's watching them who copied Elevation, they're copying that. And then, it just goes down the line. So I make the argument, I kind of believe it.
Yeah.
We're not very innovative in the church sometimes.
I'll never forget senior pastor, and blanking on his name right now, of Church on the Move. He was their creative director.
Whitney
George, yes.
Yeah.
So Whitney spoke at SALT several years ago, and he told me this story in one of our prep calls that when he was the creative director, kind of coming up in that church, right? This was like Andrew Stone's era of the church, and his dad was the pastor. He talked about how it was so easy to sort of get a gauge of their success based on just looking at Instagram or YouTube, because he could kind of see what other churches were doing. And they could sort of use that as a benchmark to go, okay, we are kind of staying in the innovative lane. Because I think his dad had commissioned them or something along the lines of be thought-provoking, kind of push the needle. I mean, they were in that Willow Creek era that you talk about in the book of like really challenging status quo and being seeker friendly. But he talked about once he became a pastor, that all had changed. Like everyone was there. And it was so difficult to kind of like look out to see how we were. And he said he was really convicted of like, I had to go inward in order to figure out who are we trying to be, because it wasn't just a keeping up with the Joneses or chasing this or, and I think one of the things I read as I thought about that section is I go, wow, what you wrote, I think is true. And I don't question that, but I wonder, have we maybe changed idolatry from we're going to look at other churches and kind of want that to now we've swung that pendulum so far that now we want what culture has and there's idolatry around that?
Mm-hmm. It certainly can be. I mean, I love Tim Keller says an idol is just a good thing made ultimate.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing bad if you're taking pieces from the culture, you're taking pieces from the church. But I think, a lot of the next generation is then asking, well, what are you taking from Scripture?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the basics and start to think about the why behind all these elements. And that's what I really like to see. And that's why I called my book Sacred Spaces Modern Production, because I really feel like we need to also look at church history and everything we've come through in order to get where we are today, and not think, oh, I just need one more moving light. I just need a bigger LED wall. Like, when does it stop?
Yeah. Well, and you talk about this in the book, right? That the cathedrals of old, I mean, they would paint huge murals that would cost way more time and money than an LED wall in today's day if we really were to like process that. But they were trying to make an atmosphere, a sacred space that was elevated, just like Bezalel and Olab and Exodus were commissioned by God as artisans to sort of empower the Holy Spirit through people and train them up, right? But I think I was remiss to sort of, as I read that, I just sort of got sad because I thought for my own self, I do the same thing. Like I could look at myself and go, yeah, we will point to other people or other things that we've seen, and we use that as sources of inspiration. But I was convicted of how often do I think spread my awareness of what's out there. I think that's the sort of idea of like, yeah, whether it's church, whether it's, the Grammys, how do we spread our awareness of what's there, but then seek intimacy with Christ to go, what is it you're calling us to? And I think that's what you talk about when you talk about understanding your why. And do you recognize what your abilities and giftedness are? Because there's so many stories in here, Toby, that you reference that are people doing what they know they're able to do. They can't afford the brand new sound. It's the village chapel. Okay, this isn't going to work to go upgrade the sound system because we know we're going to upgrade this room in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Now it's seeking back. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I think it's really important to understand your context, understand the people you're trying to serve, not to copy the thing you see online. Instagram envy is very expensive, and it doesn't translate most often to what you're actually doing. So, understanding your own unique context, what's authentic to your people, rather than the other.
It's also not just expensive, it's also potentially damaging to your relationship with your pastor. If you go to him and instead of using his language to shape the vision of what technology may need to look like in your church, if you say, here's what so-and-so does, so-and-so and so-and-so does, if we want to be like them, we've got, because now you're not using discipleship like language of how do we cultivate the Jesus-focused opportunity to reach more people for the gospel with technology and production as a supporting agent. You're now saying we need to be like them. And you're assuming maybe your pastor also envies all these things.
Yeah. Well, I think probably a lot of listeners are thinking, no, it's the other way around at my church.
My pastor is like,
my pastor keeps, And I think, I don't know how often you make this joke at the SALT conference, but to, texts coming and thinking like, I don't want to show this to my pastor because you guys do amazing things, very creative, very cutting edge. But then a church of 300, if their pastor saw that, it's like, oh, great. How do we do that at our church?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't. Different context.
Yeah, and they think that like a capital expense is easier sometimes than like renting it. And it's like, no, rent it for 1 or 2 and see if this is really something that like resonates well with your church. As we come to kind of a close, Toby, what do you hope people get out of this book as they read it?
2 things really. Number one, production matters. So to think of it that way, that it's a critical ministry of your church. It's how people find your church. It's how they decide if they're going to come back oftentimes. It's the first way in which they counter your church. It's the front door. And then secondly, that it's achievable. You don't have to be elevation. You don't have to have that budget to actually create something that is engaging and non-distracting and authentic at your church, that there are creative, unique ways to do it in very affordable, achievable manner.
I love that. Sacred Spaces, Modern Production, Toby Walters. You can get it anywhere books are sold. Amazon.
Yep.
Church Gear website.
Yep.
Oh, I love
TobyWalters.com.
TobyWalters.com.
Yep.
Toby, thank you for being here, man. I'm so grateful that you took the time to write this and you've taken the time to just kind of unpack it a little bit. I hope it blesses you guys, and I hope you get your hands on this book because it's blessed me. Thanks, Toby.
Yeah, appreciate it.